What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about Venom: The Last Dance, the third and final installment in the Tom Hardy Venom Trilogy. So generally speaking, when the first Venom movie came out, I wasn't in love with it, but I had a good enough time with it, and it had a lot of charm. Though that might be biased because I absolutely love Tom Hardy. I think he's a world-class actor, and I pretty much love all of his performances. Then the sequel came out, and while that movie also had a bunch of issues, it still had a lot of charm and had strong performances by Tallahassee Harrelson and obviously Tom Hardy. In fact, in my opinion, the sequel was a lot more fun than the first one, although I do understand that the rating definitely held it back, especially when talking about the potential that you really could have had with a character like Carnage. Still, despite the faults of the first two films, they were still very entertaining and just dumb fun that nobody can really criticize for liking that low-hanging fruit type of movie that's not trying to be anything more than what it is. And because of that, I was of the opinion that there was no need to have a third entry in this series. Not everything has to be a trilogy. But of course that wasn't going to be the case, and in The Last Dance, we follow Eddie and Venom as they are on the run from an enemy named Noel, as he essentially sends a mercenary to hunt down Eddie and Venom. Oh, and by the way, the army's also hunting them down due to their shenanigans from the previous films. Right off the bat, while it's not as strong as it was in the first two films, easily the best part of this movie is still the chemistry between Eddie and Venom. Their banter and random interactions feel very brotherly and build off of already the established relationship that we've come to know them to have. And I think that the tone is still very consistent, not just in this film, but as a whole in the entire trilogy. It's just wacky, silly fun. Also, if you're a fan of the Venom comics, you're gonna really appreciate the eye candy that you get in the third act. And to be fair, the movie tries its best to show as many distinctions as possible to try and differentiate all the symbiotes, even if you're not well versed in the comics. Ebony Maw is interesting conceptually, but I wish they would have gone either deeper into his lore or just not at all. The creature thing was enough of a threat to not need Noel, in my opinion, considering how much screen time he got. And I guess the walking wood chipper is presented in a way where you actually question how the hell are they gonna beat this thing? It's menacing and immediately shows its presence as how dangerous it is for even Venom to handle. Hell, he barely got away the first time they interacted. Now, I don't know what happened that threw this movie so in the meh category for me, especially since there was so much talk about Tom Hardy really backing up Kelly Marcel's directorial vision for this film. But even though she wrote the screenplay for all three films, this one lacked the charm and earnestness that the first two had. This story is also just a mess. Like, you cannot tell me an actual legitimate purpose for the Vegas sequence outside of a forced dance sequence that narratively makes no sense, because it also vastly minimizes the threat of this so-called world or universal threat by saying, whatever, it can track me the moment I turn fully Venom. I don't care, I just want to show the audience some ABBA, and by the way, figure out a way to drop in Mrs. Chen from the other two movies. And on the topic of things making no sense, the entire road trip was so freaking pointless. Not only were they meandering for so long, but they had the audacity to try and nod as if it's trying to reference Thelma and Louise, which is in every way a better film. I truly didn't understand what we were doing for the entire middle chunk of this film. Things just happened to happen. The Doctor resonated 0% with the smallest amount of background that we got that ended up just being plot convenience. Martin and his family had zero purpose in the story outside of later giving Venom an opportunity to be heroic of all things. I don't even mean to be nitpicky, but it's just that some of these decisions literally hurt my brain. Like, another example is that the army was able to track every single movement that Eddie made across North America. They were able to smell every fart he farted, but that 30-foot monster thing was able to sneak into their base with so much ease. The Psycho Woodchipper thing also was hell inconsistent. This thing detected Venom and in seconds jumped onto a plane from the ground and used hypersonic speeds to travel across states to reach him. But all of a sudden, a bike is too fast for him to catch up in the third act. I was just like, what is happening? Like I said before, I love Tom Hardy. Alfie Solomons is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and that's fully because of Hardy's performance. But honestly, in this one, he just seemed so apathetic and disconnected, like he didn't even want to be there. Also, even though the best part of this film is still the relationship between Eddie and Venom, it leaned way too hard into the jokes that were genuinely among the worst of the franchise. I swear with each film, it felt like Venom became more and more of a goofball, and that can sometimes work with a character like Thor, but Venom is certainly not one of the examples where that can work. Honestly, one of the things that makes this a frustrating watch is that Venom is entirely not a bad guy. Like in the other movies, he was barely a danger to good guys, but here he's basically a superhero. I cannot understand what's the obsession with humanizing and sympathizing these villain characters. These guys are meant to be villains where we shouldn't be rooting for them. The only way I can accept that not being the case is if they change the character to make it a better story and more entertaining for us. But let me tell you, that's not the case here. And I'd say my biggest complaint as a whole about this movie is that because of how earnest the first two films felt, despite its flaws, you still felt the emotional pull from the performances of Tom and Venom. But I hated that this movie tried so many times to force you to feel the emotions. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel organic anymore. They show you so many tear-jerking goodbye-like moments in the film, like for example the recap montage of the entire series, or foreshadowing its goodbye for now, or even forcing in a dance sequence that has no place in a story like this that you're trying to convey. But overall, despite my complaints, it's mainly just because I feel like logic was thrown out the window when it comes to this movie in particular, but it still was fun, and somehow it still maintained the same tone that the first two movies had. And honestly, despite the flaws of the first two films, had this movie been done better, it would have made for a cute little trilogy, even though I'm still of the opinion that I still think that it should have just been the first two films and leave it at that. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.